all the diplomatic efforts, including Al Haig's, were to leave them there and to avoid a war, avoid a counter-invasion, if you like. And really, the story of the first phase of the campaign, if you like, while the fleet is steaming south, is of all kinds of meddlers around the world trying to achieve a compromise in which the Argentine remain in charge of the islands. Well, it was never on. And I mean, the British public wouldn't have tolerated that.
The task force arrived at Ascension Island in the South Atlantic on the 16th of April. 9 days later, on the 25th of April, South Georgia was recaptured. News of the event was delivered by John Knott to the press gathered outside Downing Street.
The commander of the operation has sent the following message. Be pleased to inform Her Majesty that the White Ensign flies alongside the Union Jack in South Georgia. God save the Queen.
What happens next, Mr. Knott?
Thank you very much.
What's your reaction,
Just rejoice at that news and congratulate our forces and the Marines.
Are we going to declare war on Argentina, Mrs. Thatcher?
All kinds of people said that this was not an appropriate response. Well, I've never understood what would be a more appropriate response. And yet all, we got them with virtually no loss of life, as far as I know. We'd recovered them. We weren't going to moan, were we? She couldn't conceivably say, moan, moan. No, I mean, really, I think people who wanted to take a bite out of her just would pick on anything, and rejoice was a reason to have a go at her, but I've never understood it.
Diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict were getting nowhere. In a series of interviews on April the 30th, President Reagan backed Britain's right to take back the Falklands. If there was any remaining hope for a diplomatic solution, that ended with the sinking of the Belgrano on May the 2nd, with the loss of 368 crew.
We knew they were up to no good, and they believed that the 25th of May cruiser, I think it was, and the Belgrano were, whatever they were doing and wherever they were steaming at the moment, were involved in a pincer movement. And therefore the decision was given to sink it. And it sank. And there were 300 or more Argentinian lives lost. Now, you don't rejoice at the loss of life, but you do rejoice at the elimination of a battleship that could place the lives of your troops and sailors and airmen in very serious jeopardy.
2 days later, the task force suffered its first heavy casualty, with the sinking of HMS Sheffield and the loss of 21 lives.
We feel deep sorrow for the loss of our ship, for which we had great affection. We feel considerable anger that we were struck in the first place. We feel particularly frustration that we're not still fighting alongside the task force.
We're talking about seconds to react rather than minutes. And I'm sure you will appreciate that a missile which comes in less than 12 feet off the deck at very high speed, many hundreds of miles an hour, gives us a very short time of response. And we saw it at a stage at which there was really no time to do anything other than for those who were in the immediate vicinity of the small number of people who saw this missile appearing, only had time to say take cover. And we're talking about 3 or 4 seconds later, the missile striking HMS Sheffield.
The loss of life had a profound effect on the Prime Minister.
It did upset her, but she never wavered at all. I mean, and this was what the military had been very worried about. How will she react to something like the Sheffield, you know, if it happens? Well, I mean, she was deeply upset, but it never affected her judgment or her determination.
The Tory party chairman, Mr. Cecil Parkinson, had warned earlier, we are approaching a decisive phase in the crisis.
On Tuesday the 18th of May, the War Cabinet met with all the Chiefs of Staff, and a decision was taken to go ahead with a landing on the Falklands, subject to Cabinet approval.
The day we took the decision to go in, Perez de Cuellar, the UN Secretary General, said, effectively the Argentinians are hopeless, the British have done everything that could be expected of them, I can do no more. Well, from that moment, that was the moment. From then on, it was up to us to choose the time. And so we didn't want to keep our troops bouncing around on ships, so the decision was taken to go in.
Did we really expect to suffer such casualties? 4 ships sunk in as many days and as many again damaged.
On May the 21st, British troops landed at San Carlos, but then came under enemy fire from the air. The frigate HMS Ardent was lost. Another frigate, HMS Argonaut, and a destroyer, HMS Brilliant, were both badly damaged.
Her decks were packed with vehicles and munitions, and deep inside her were 2 unexploded bombs.
The loss of ships was a blow, but the first objective was achieved. 5,000 men had safely landed. The landing also brought to an end Britain's preparedness to negotiate.
We've tried, but they're not going to get off of their own volition, therefore they have to be removed. The real difficulty would have been if we'd have had severe losses when they were landing. But another miracle was that they got 5,000 odd troops ashore with scarcely a casualty.
Now, fully committed to military action, on the 27th of May, the troops moved in on Goose Green, and the battle was fierce.
At first light, the full extent of the horror of the fighting became apparent. The thick gorse that had hidden Argentine bunkers was still ablaze or smoking after what had been a furious battle.
With Argentine surrender came freedom for the people of Goose Green, who'd been imprisoned inside their community hall for 3 weeks. Both sides took casualties. Many of the troops sustained injury and several lost their lives, including one of the more famous casualties of the war, Colonel H. Jones, the commander of 2 Para, who lost his life in securing the way forward for his troops. He was buried along with his men.
Lieutenant Colonel Jones, Captain Wood, Captain Dent, Lieutenant Barry.
As military action intensified, so once again the Americans tried to revive diplomatic negotiations. At the same time, UN Secretary-General Javier Perez de Cuellar advanced a 5-point peace plan. There were calls for a ceasefire.
I don't think Mrs. Thatcher, after the initial fumbling and great doubt and deep natural concern, I don't think that she contemplated continuation of any dual track. We were going to war, and the faster we went to war, the better. I know that her view was not unanimously shared amongst senior responsible officers, but to their credit, they're not inclined to refuse the political will of a democratically elected government.
In the Falklands, preparations were being made for the final assault on Port Stanley. Support troops, equipment and ammunition had been moved from San Carlos to Bluff Cove and Fitzroy, from where soldiers would advance on the capital. Before the operation was complete, however, the British troops were subject to devastating attack by the Argentines.
The Skyhawks came in to attack and were out again with our gunfire chasing them too late. So sudden, so unannounced, we knew nothing until we saw the black smoke